If you want to scale your business or your startup from a small team you can fit into a single room into a 500 people army that are well organized and know where to go, well, as long as you have a product company and not a service company, this video is for you. In fact, what we're gonna do today is to look at David Sacks, the crypto czars of the current Trump administration, the Cadence operating model, and many successful entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, and of course David Sacks have all used the concepts and have taken advantage of the ideas that we will see in this video. In fact, a common problem that a successful business has is that the more successful you are, the more chaos will that bring, and the more messy things get. But thanks to David Sacks' operating model, we will see that you do not need to hire an expensive COO, you just need to have a good and structured operating philosophy, which is the Cadence. Okay, so let's start with this operating philosophy. First, you have to divide your operations into two major systems, the sales finance system and the product marketing system. So yes, marketing and sales are not together, but don't worry, this is the same system that brought Yammer into $1 billion valuation in less than 1 year. I think still the fastest growing SaaS to this day. So the first part of this video, we are going to look at the product marketing system, starting with the product calendar. So we're going to start with an analogy. Imagine that your new products and major releases are like rocks, whereas the features are more like pebbles, and finally the fixes are just sand. If you have a jar and you want to put the most amount of stuff into the jar, well, if you start with the sand, chances are you will not have time or you will not have space to put in some rocks, which are the major releases. So thanks to the Cadence and the product calendar that now we're gonna see, you should start focusing on the rocks first, the major releases. First, you put the big rocks, and so only after that you start building features and fixes. Because if you don't put the rocks first, you will actually only ship sand. So the product cycle is based on a quarterly basis. So you will have 3 months divided as such. The first month, you're gonna just prioritize and plan your big rocks, so your major releases and new updates. During the second month, you do testing, you do demos, QA, everything to make sure that your product is going well. And then finally, the third month of the quarter, it's heads down, no distraction, you just focus and ship. Then attached to the product calendar, there is the marketing calendar. And this is probably the most important part of the video, because for marketing, we're gonna use an event-based marketing, and that's the whole point of the Cadence. But first, why is marketing attached to product? Well, simply because marketing feeds off of product. Now that we know when the major releases, the new products will be, well, we can just plan marketing around that. And instead of scattering our message throughout the whole year in 52 weeks, we just focus on 4 major lightning strikes. And this is exactly what the vast majority of big and successful entrepreneurs already do to these days. We already mentioned at the beginning of this video Elon Musk with all the Tesla launches, Steve Jobs with the legendary Apple keynotes, Mark Benioff with Agentforce and Dreamforce, the largest tech conference in the world. But also Amazon and Google, they both have annual events. And then of course also David Sacks with the Yammer and PayPal. The point here is that if all of these people and successful entrepreneurs are doing it, probably you should do it too, and here is why. The main upside, in my opinion, of doing such a thing is the internal benefits that you get. For example, imagine that you have your CEO that is going on stage in 1 quarter to present what you are building. Well, that creates a huge amount of motivation inside the team. And at the same time, it creates actual discipline, because the deadlines become non-negotiable. Your CEO is going on stage to talk about your product. That's it. This is the deadline. You have to ship by that deadline. Now, one last thing to mention before moving to the sales and finance system is that you don't really need to have exactly 4 big lightning strikes. It's just much more than enough to do one that is very good, but then you do want to have the internal benefits we just talked about, the discipline, the motivation, etc, etc. So you do want to keep 4 big events, but one can be the major lightning strike with the major product and new releases, And the other 3 maybe smaller webinars or city events that can still give you all the internal benefits of having the Cadence, but at the same time you don't really have to have 4 gigantic lightning strikes at a year. Okay, so moving to the second part of the video, the sales and finance system. First, the sales calendar. Here again, you want to keep it on a quarterly basis, but why is that? Because if you do your sales cycles on a yearly basis, well, the chances are you're probably too slow to move and create something great. At the same time, if you do monthly, it's too volatile, and unless you have sales cycles of products that are very, very short, you really do not want to do that as well. So how are we going to structure the quarter? First month, sales kickoff. You set new plans, new quotas, new territories, and also product training if you have a sales team. Second month, pipeline review and pipeline inspection. So essentially just mid-quarter adjustments to make sure you get to your quotas. But at the same time, the second month, we will see this later on better, but during the second month of the sales cycles, you will have the major product releases. So you will have these big events, and the sales team can feed off of the marketing hype that is being created to make sure they get on their quotas. And then finally, the third month, just like in the product cycle, heads down, minimal distraction, just focus on closing the deals. And finally, we move to the finance calendar. Here it's much more intuitive to see why the finance calendar should be snapped with the sales calendar, and that's simply because you want the financial year to show a more accurate picture of the whole financial year, and therefore it should be blended with the sales calendar. But the real question here is, when should it start? When should the financial year start? January 31st beats Christmas chaos. Ditch December, January is the new December. You do really want to avoid the Christmas chaos, because toward the end of the year, many smart vendors know that is the end of the fiscal year and they will demand heavy discounts. And at the same time, you do want to give your sales team a bit of rest and enjoy the Christmas with their family. So with one move, which is putting the end of the fiscal year 1 month after the beginning of the year, you avoid year-end rushes and all the discounts that goes with that, and at the same time you make your sales team happier. One last thing to mention in the finance calendar, you do want to have your board meeting 2 to 3 weeks after the end of the quarter, so that the leadership has a good pictures of both the sales and the finance picture, and it just makes everything work well. Okay, now the big part. We have the 2 main systems, but how are we snapping these 2 systems together? The key concept here is that you do not want to set everybody's hair on fire at the same time. So you take the 2 systems and you offset them by half a quarter. By doing so, you simply create less burnout within the company, and you create also an improved balance throughout the whole year, rather than having ups and downs company-wide. Finally, before ending the video, I want to really mention that the Cadence was initially meant to be for startups that are between 50 and 500 people. So if you have a chaos, usually is because you are a Series A company with already 10 to 50 people, and that's when the chaos starts, when you're from 10 to 50 people that you're scaling and you don't really know how to organize your operations. And if you really want to get out of that chaos from 10 to 50 people and again get to an organized army of 500 people, you do need a COO, or as we have seen, an operating philosophy, not necessarily a COO. But I do believe that it is better to start even earlier, and that is because you don't really need to wait for chaos to get to your company to start implementing discipline. We already saw all the internal benefits of having the Cadence implemented into your company, so why should you not want to do that even earlier? There are many advantages into implementing the Cadence, and there is also a cultural advantage. That is because many founders and CEOs struggle to understand if a startup is more of a marathon or more of a sprint. Well, David Sachs argues that it's neither. That is because if you think of a startup as a marathon, then you're just moving slowly, you don't really have pressure, and you just go with the flow and you don't really ship fast. At the same time, if you think of a startup as a sprint, you get burnout immediately. So what the Cadence does is that it creates a combination of a sprint and a marathon. It creates ladder essentially. So you do have periods of sprint and intense focus that you have to ship the big products and have the major releases, which is 4 times a year. You have 4 sprints sprints per year, but at the same time you do have a period of rest between these 4 sprints. And one thing that I really want to mention is that you may think that 4 big sprints per year is really not enough, and you do want to ship every week 52 times a year. But if you do stick to the cadence over a long period of time, you will see that 4 major lightning strikes for your company per year is much more than enough, and that is what has happened with the biggest company as we have seen in the world. So if we want to sum everything up into one big bottom line, it's the following. First, align your startup around a clear and predictable quarterly cycle. Second, strategically offset product marketing and sales finance to maximize the impact and balance the organization. Third, adapt the cadence to fit your stage and size. You don't necessarily need to have 4 huge lightning strikes per year. 1 big lightning strike and 4 small webinar or city events is enough. 4. Use event-driven marketing to create these important lightning strike at least once a year. And finally, remember that startups are not marathons, they are not even sprints, they are ladders. Sprint, rest, repeat. Okay guys, that was it for this video. Thank you for listening until the end, and I will see you next time.